Good afternoon, Sean here, Mountains Garage. It's a beautiful Thursday here in the state of Maine. Fantastic weather, low humidity, my kind of day. 70 degrees out. The last time I shot a video, there was a Turbo 400 made by TCI on that fixture, and I don't know if I had put up the TH475 over here that I had picked up. It was supposed to be rebuilt, but I could see that the owner of it had gone at it with a massive tube of red caulking. It had some leaks, and I wanted to make sure, it's going to another friend of mine, that it was ready to go. So I stripped it apart and put it back together. The TCI 400 was a good street transmission. I'm sure that's what it was built for, street fighter, whatever they call it. It was wholly average, but it was in relatively good shape inside. Other than the torque converter had let go. At some point, I'm guessing it had a torque converter that had thrust washers instead of bearings. And most of those thrust washers had made their way through the transmission because everything in the transmission was correct. But it had a lot of metal in it. So I didn't shoot any video on either one. I wanted to get them done. And it's still Thursday, and I just finished up the TH350 this morning. The 400 I had done by Tuesday. Long story short, I just wanted to get them done, hoping at the end of this week I would get a little bit of my own work in. And that's what I think is going to happen. I used to do a ton of TH350 transmissions and power glides. Now it's a rare day, and 700R4s. Now it's a rare day when I see any of those. Most 700R4 and 4L60Es I don't want to do. It's hard to make people happy with one of those, and it's hard to take responsibility for a 30 or 40-year-old transmission, which is what you're doing if you accept money to fix it. It's a poor piece of engineering, good for light throttle cruising at best. Any amount of abuse, it will fail. So I'm not a 4L60 or 700R4 fan, 4L65, 4L70, not a fan of any of them. So, but that's not what we're here to learn and talk about. But the TH350, no matter how many I've done or how many years I've done them, in this case I hadn't seen the inside of one in 3 or 4 years. It was a nice transmission, but it doesn't matter who you are or how long you've been doing it. I still found myself looking for my book, and I actually didn't find it. Because I had a couple questions about things I'd taken apart. A few days had gone by. I said, which way does this thing go? I'm only human. You know what I mean? A 400, those through repetition over the last few years, that I could do in my sleep. Something I used to do. You can only retain so much information. There was no shame in looking it up in the book. In this case, I had to figure it out because I didn't want to waste a lot of time looking for the manual. But I'll find it and put it in a safe spot so I'll know where it is, because that's what the whole shop organization project that I continue to talk about, and I'm making some progress on, and I'm going to prove it here in a second, is all about, so I can know where stuff is. Because through my own fault, I have too much stuff. Not a bad problem to have. Just got to find a place to put it. So presented here is proof positive that I am making some headway. Other than the walkie-talkie that my son calls me on when he wants a fluff another sandwich. I mounted this fixture here. I had a piece of drive shaft loop that I'd cut off, the one I fit into the Nova, that I put in my hydraulic press and bent at a 90 degree and screwed into a stud because I'm afraid with the weight of a transmission out here, I didn't want the bench to come toppling over. So I'm going to, there's quite a few tools here. There's a toolbox here that I'm still trying to find. But I want to make sure I have at least all the sockets and pliers and screwdrivers and stuff that I need. The actual, specialty tools, I don't mind going to walking over there for, but I don't want to, walk 10 miles to build over here. I need to, and this has been on my list regardless, I'm going to put a 8-foot LED in between each set of lights in each bay. So the end of each bay will get an 8-foot LED, and this area here is going to get one, which will be right over my bench. When I wired the shop, I made the outside L on switch number 1. Switch number 2 does this H in the middle. I actually added that LED that's in the middle as a gift, just to see if it was any good. I like it. It really lights up the whole area over the workbench where I'm currently working. But I never really intended, apparently, to do a lot of work on this end of the shop. So it suffers from needing more light. I don't have the lights on in the third bay right now. That'd be switch number 3 if you're coming in my door. But I can tie into any of these, so I'll figure out exactly how I want them to come on. And I need to get 3 or 4 8-foot LEDs on the list of projects. I think I'm going to move my valve grinder on this end of the bench. Or move this vise, that's the valve grinder under there, spin it over here facing outward as ballast, because I'm thinking of mounting the transmission holding fixture on the corner of this bench, paint this bench up nice, obviously clean all the junk off it, because this is the only one that's serviced by a crane. Now, trust me, this is not approved by anybody using your lift post as a overhead crane. I actually did it because it swivels right over the engine bay, and if you have a bare block and you want to make motor mounts and stuff, it'll hold it steady. I love a chain fall for that. It works really well. I lifted a 6-cylinder Cummins 5.9. I won't do that again. A big block Chevy's a lot for it. A small block is a piece of cake. A Turbo 400 or something would be nothing. So it goes all the way to the floor. It lives right there. I can just pull it off, roll the chain fall out, and easily lift the transmission up into the holder. So, all things that'll happen in the future. It had to be 5 or 6 weeks ago now that I mentioned I'm building a TH475 for my twin turbo Nova. I'm going to pull out the 475 that's in there. I decided to build one with better shafts. Why not? And I'm going to build it on the channel. We're going to go over the whole thing. So I had ordered an ATI forward drum with input shaft. That was in stock. Summit Racing. That was here in a day or so. The 4L80E drum, I did my usual stuff to it. These are both 6 clutch. These are all packed and ready to go. I have chronicled, and I'll go over it again using 4L80E parts. My 4 clutch intermediate. I bought an ATI output shaft, which cost as much as people want for used ones on eBay. You might as well buy a super high horsepower ATI shaft for what people want for stock ones. And I had ordered from Jegs, and they told me it was 1 day out, and they're doing the best they can. I'm not holding Jegs responsible for the fact that now it's 5 or 6 weeks later, and today I finally got the shaft. That sounds funny, doesn't it? It's a beautiful looking piece. It says on the package here, part number 603260, 603260. Heavy duty input shaft for GM Turbo 400. Rated for 1,100 horsepower, and I believe somewhere in the paperwork that was at 4,000 pounds. So I don't have 1,100 horsepower, and I don't have 4,000 pounds. So I don't believe I ever would have broke a stock one, but now I'm putting 3 shafts in the transmission, and it'll be that much better than a stock one. Again, I don't believe I have enough power at this point in time, and probably in the future, to break the stock one. But anyway, I wanted to go forward with something better. The parts were not outrageous, so let's go over it. This shaft, I believe, was, call it $200. I think the input shaft and drum was $250 maybe-ish. So it's $450, and that was $130, so call it $600 with miscellaneous stuff. You've improved the rating of your transmission substantially. So add that on if you're building a transmission for yourself. I believe, just off the cuff, if you build a transmission for yourself, at this point with all the good shafts and stuff, you're going to spend, probably including the core, at least a couple $1,000. But if you look at what a transmission costs with all these options, you're saving a substantial amount by doing it yourself. So, and if it breaks, you can fix it yourself. So there's lots of savings. Truck freight. You know, there's nothing wrong with buying a transmission, having it shipped to you, putting it in. If you have the budget for that, and that's what you want to do, if I had the money, I might do that too. But I don't, so I have always been forced to do it myself. And after a while, you don't even consider any other option. And I almost forgot the most important part. Made in the USA. So all 3 shafts are made in the USA. I also bought, and I've already put it away out in the box, my outside speed shop I call it, as I bought the CK Performance forward drum with shaft also. They sell 3 of them, 3 horsepower levels. I bought the one in the middle. It actually had a credit, so I was using that, so I went ahead and added a little more, and that'll be for the future, or who knows. Often people want at least an input shaft to change, so I'll have it in stock. Who knows what the future entails. Also important to note, at least at CK Performance, and I'm sure other places, they have 3 different horsepower levels. They'll also sell you one with or without the holes. Now, if you don't have the lubrication holes, you have to have a bushed converter, and you're going to take the front stator bushing out of the pump. In my case, I may or may not have a bushed converter. I choose to run the stator bushing because I don't have any fear that I have enough power to break the shaft that has the lubrication holes. But if you look at your input shaft that you bought and you don't have lubrication holes, you absolutely need to remove the front stator bushing and make sure the turbine in your converter is bushed. So you have to talk to your converter guy about that, converter person. So let's move on to some other subject. But this TH475 build is coming up probably within the next few weeks because I now have all the parts to do it. I'm probably going to cut the bell housing off the TH475 that's fresh out of a motorhome over there on the floor if I'm a little bit thrown off by this, because the one I built last week was a 1987 TH475 and it only had a 6-bolt case. Now I'm putting an ATI bell housing on mine and I'm going to go with all 8 bolts. So if I strip that one over there on the floor and it has an 8-bolt case, I'll be using that. Plan B will be to maybe continue working to try to save that Pontiac HD bell housing, or I have other Chevrolets that I know are 8-bolt cases, but I hate to use one of them. But if I can't use it for myself, what's the sense of having it? Now let's talk about the 1964 Dart. It was midnight a week ago when I decided that if I'm going to install the 8 3/4, which is behind me on the floor, and it's almost ready to install, but it has these small Mopar U-joint. Mopar has small and big. So if you're a Mopar guy, you already know that. When I was LS swapping the Dodge, I could tell you the part numbers. I even spent a ridiculous amount of money for the large Mopar joint to 1350 adapter, and then didn't end up using it. I ended up putting a 1350 yoke on the 9 1/4 in the LS swap Dodge pickup. So instead of having to deal with changing the yoke, because there's a drive shaft in the car, but I'm sure it doesn't fit anything I have or I'm going to use, because I'm LS swapping the 64 Dart. So go ahead and send all the hate mail. I'm not going to hurt the car any. I'm actually going to go to great pains not to have to modify a whole lot. I don't see myself, I'm going to probably sell off the 360 and 727. I don't see myself using it. If it doesn't sell, I'll put it in the shed and do something with it. But I just cannot get behind spending a bunch of money because I don't have all the parts to put in the Mopar powertrain. It doesn't fit well to start with. When if I'm going to go into the growing pains of having to make something fit, I want more than a couple hundred horsepower. So it's going to get I have a GT45 turbo. I have like a Chinese log manifold. It's going to get all the junk. Probably make 500-600 horsepower. It's going to have a power glide because I believe that's going to fit the floor better than a 400. I will try. I have dummy cases when I start mocking it up. I'll try them both. I don't want to have to butcher the area around the stock transmission cross member. It's the torsion bar cross member. It's the whole thing. I don't want to butcher that, or I'm pretty sure I could slip a power glide right in there. And the 8 3/4 behind me has a 391 gear, with a 176 Power Glide. As far as starting line ratio, not that I'm even ever going to race it, but that is actually a pretty good combination. I know one particular Nova that's almost into the sixes, a drag week car, Motion Performance, Doug's Nova. He's running the 390 gear and going 190 miles an hour. So, and still cruising into 1,000 miles on drag week, so with no overdrive. He has a Power Glide. So, with that as inspiration, I'll have a third of his horsepower. But I think it'll be a pretty good combination. It won't be too horrible to drive, and let's face it, I'm not going that far anyway. If I am, I'll come up with something better. So, it's midnight, and I decide I'm going to put a 1350 yoke on the 8 3/4 before I put it under the car. Now, I suppose even with 9-inch Ford, you need to know a lot of information. So, basically, as far as the yoke goes, it's 29 spline or 10 spline, and I'm thinking to myself, it's not a tractor PTO. What are the chances it's 10 spline? The last one I bought was 29 for a customer. So I spent 80 bucks from, wait for it, the guy's business name is Dr. Diff. He's in Poison, Montana, I think. I'll find the box, but cool name of a company, and Poison, Montana. That sounds like quite a place. I buy the 29 spline 1350 yoke. It comes with the spicy U-joints, that's U-bolts. I think I just said that. I'm waiting for it to show up, and I wrestled the stock yoke off the 8 3/4. Other than the pinion nut was kind of rusted, it wasn't that bad. And I have a 10 spline pinion shaft. So out in my outside speed shop storage box, I now have a 29 spline 1350 8 3/4 yoke in stock. And I ordered another one off eBay. This happens to be, again, from Dr. Diff. I'm not a spokesperson for him. I could have called Quick Performance. They give me excellent service too. But at midnight, I'm just pressing the button. Buy it now. And again, it came, it's a beautiful looking yoke. Again, with genuine spicy U-bolts. It took me almost as long to get the correct pinion seal. With an 8 3/4 Mopai, you need to know the housing number. 741, 742, 489. These are the last 3 digits of the casting number. I thought I had a 489, but I'm glad I checked before I ordered it. And I have a 741, which calls for this national seal. And this took a couple days to get. But my local auto parts store, in this case, was cheaper than online. And I wanted to make sure I didn't buy the wrong one. So I carefully saved the old one so I can measure it. That's the old yoke. I had enough time, because it's been sitting here in the background for a week now, right in my way, that I pulled the outer pinion bearing out, and I've determined that it has a shimmed crush situation instead of a crush collar. So when I reinstall this, I can just pound the nut right on. That's important to know. If you had a crush collar and you continue to tighten the nut, you're going to over tighten the pinion bearings. In this case, it's shimmed. I can tighten until my heart's content, and it doesn't matter. And with the yoke off, it's a simple matter of just sliding that bearing off and seeing what's behind it. So today, I'm going to stick this on, and the weather's nice, like I mentioned. I'm going to put the forks of the tractor, put the rear end right under it, and I think I can stab it right in there like a spear over the leaf springs. I could wrestle it in by hand. It's not that heavy, but I'd much rather set it in there with the tractor if I can. Trying to work smarter, not harder. The rear end has, the pinion snubber is Mopai's answer long before Caltrax were thought of. This, when the pinion starts to climb, the ring gear pushes the pinion, the nose of the rear end into the floorboard, causing the car to lift and to push the rear end back into the track or the road. It's a wonderful design. Long before radial tires were thought of, but now with a drag radial, it's exactly what you want the car to do. You want it to separate and plant in the rear end. Mopai had it all figured out in the 70s, the 60s even. So it has 4 bolt holes. An 8 3/4 only has 2. In this case, mine are full of what appear to be 40, 50 years worth of dirt, but I'm going to clean them out and install this as well. So this came with the car. I got boxes and boxes of stuff. This is a brand new, well, almost new, pinion snubber. adjustable. So I've cleaned up the housing opening and the splines on the pinion because I like to put RTV on the splines so oil doesn't try to escape out past the nut and the washer. And I'll do my normal deal. I'll pack the seal with Vaseline up to here. And in this case, I'm going to put just a skim coat of clear RTV on the outside of the seal itself. And I made this tool a while back. It's pretty universal, just a piece of pipe, but sure is handy when the pinion's sticking out of the middle. You could hammer on the outside, but that works pretty good. You can see the witness mark on the old seal that it stuck out a little bit, and it actually made it really easy to remove because that flange was sticking out. So I wasn't alarmed at all when the new one stuck out as well. It went in square and stopped, and we're done here. So I cleaned up the old pinion nut and washer. Like I mentioned, I filled the 10 splines of the yoke with clear RTV, slid it on. What bulged out I smoothed out and put under the washer, filled the nut with Loctite, and gunned it together with no fear of crushing the pinion bearings because it has a shim. And then I gave it a coat of paint. Where the pinion snubber was going to sit, I didn't think these bolt holes had a chance. I couldn't even really tell they were bolt holes. The housing actually looked like it was broken, but it was just years and years and decades of accumulated dirt. So I started with a pick and a pocket screwdriver. Ended up getting first a tap and then a bottoming tap in the holes, a 3/8/16. And I took a whiz wheel, cleaned the housing up with this set so it's nice and flat, including there's another boss under these bolts. I wish it bolted on all four. That's just the way I am, but this doesn't line up or have any bolts out here, so that's the way they designed it. And I got it all bolted on. Now I got a little bit of work to do to the shock plates and stuff to bolt this in the car. So I'm going to go ahead and clean that up in the next video. I guess we'll be sticking it in the car. This video already got pretty long, so 8 3/4 ready to go in. I have backing plates with new brakes. I don't remember if the wheel cylinders were any good. I knew they were new at one point, but they're pretty old. They even have parking brake cables and stuff. And I got a pair of drums and a pair of brand new axles over there in the Quick Performance box. So that's the only reason I'm putting this 8 3/4 in. I mean, the housing's all ready to fit the car, hopefully. But if it bothers at all, I have a 9H4 that's the right width. Probably more my speed, but I'm committed at this point, so this is going in. Well, that was a fun afternoon. It went by really fast. It always does when you're working on your own stuff. Save your little fingers on your keyboard. I know the potential of a small block Mopar. I have a friend of mine bought a Duster when he got back from Vietnam. He's been racing it over 50 years. He runs 850 in the quarter mile. Mopar, the Chrysler Corporation, should buy it back so they can understand how that thing could wheelie for over 50 years and land back down to earth, and it's still doing it. And the door's still open and closed. But that is the nastiest sounding motor I've probably ever heard. You can hear him coming a mile away and you know it's him. Great potential with a huge budget. He's accumulated a lot of parts over 50 years. Awesome. That potential is still there. I won't harm the car at all, but it's going to get a cheap LS swap power glide, a 1350 drive shaft. The car's already got it. It's not a car that even Mopar people want. So save your breath. I know what I'm doing. If you like this kind of thing, follow along. I love you either way. Like, share, subscribe. I'll catch you later.